It would seem Luke in today's Gospel is trying to make a very particular point. Sometimes when we hear Jesus' parables, you can find wriggle room for ambiguity. See the possibility of there being more than one way to see things. But today's message seems to me to be pretty straightforward. It's directed at those who trusted in themselves that they were righteous and then regarded others with contempt, especially with the Pharisee having a direct potshot at the tax collector. But the message at the end is clear. It is the tax collector, not the Pharisee, who goes home justified, you might say, aligned with God. So as you've listened to that little parable of the two characters, of the Pharisee and of the tax collector, which one do you find yourself siding with? Which do you think it will be better to be like? Well, if you're sort of a person that wants to be aligned with God, it strikes me the most obvious one to want to be like is the tax collector, the lovely, humble tax collector. And yet, as soon as we take a side, just decide one of them is more worthy than the other, we become very much like a Pharisee. The very person we're saying we prefer not to be. It's a funny kind of parable. It's as if it undoes itself in its telling, because it seems to want to invite us to judge and to deem that one is more righteous than the other, and then immediately makes us someone who trusts they know what righteous is, and thereby potentially has contempt for the one who falls short. To be a bit of context, some of you may have come across Amy Jill Levine, a liberal Jewish rabbi. She points out that both of these men have come into the temple to pray. Both of them have made themselves ritually clean because both know what is required to belong in this place. The Pharisee's prayer reveals that he fulfills what the law requires. In fact, he surpasses what the law requires. He opens his prayer by thanking God for his moral excellence, even as the rest of the prayer does seem to be all about him. Levine reflects, rather than seeing the Pharisee as all selfish and bad, we might see him as helping the tax collector. For just as the sin of one person impacts the community, that phrase in the Lord's Prayer, forgive us our sins, not forgive me my sins, so the merits of the righteous can benefit the community. Perhaps the Jews who first heard this parable understood the Pharisee's merit positively impacted the tax collector. And this would be the shock of the parable. Not only is the tax collector, who is an agent of Rome, justified, but that the Pharisee's own good works helped him to be justified. You see, in this story, the characters are set over against one another, or maybe that's the way they hear them, but both belong and are part of the community, a part of the temple. Their lives are intertwined. The impact each impacts on the other. I found that quite a helpful way to understand the whole concept, and perhaps for us to see the Pharisee in a different light. But I'm sorry, it doesn't diminish the fact that the better part of us feeling good about himself comes from favourably comparing himself with just about everybody. He is pretty judgy, particularly of the hapless tax collector who just happens to be in his sightline. Unlike the tax collector, whose prayer also begins, "O God," unlike him, the tax collector, whose prayer also begins, "O God," the tax collector's prayer is simple and short. Be merciful to me, a sinner. As if he knows who he is in himself. He knows he's not righteous and he is in need of mercy. He accepts how the Pharisee sees him, and he also accepts the gifts of the Pharisees' good works. It's almost as if in the telling of this story there's a perspective shift happening. Luke has Jesus discerning the heart of each man, the honest intention that each of them bring to their prayer. The Pharisee is very faithful for keeping the law and doing good works, and that has merit. But if the doing of them becomes the reward, then closed-heartedness can be the outcome. The tax collector comes with open-hearted honesty. Being an agent of Rome brings and gains him no merit, but he opens himself to the possibility of the transforming grace of God. To righteousness, he holds the possibility of this. Both belong to a faith community before God. This is not in question. The way that Luke portrays them might give us quite a bit of information about a faith community. So we, as a faith community, might also learn something from this about what it is to be part of a faith community, about what it is to be individuals within it, of who we think we are, or think we are before God. It is as if the two characters present, we could call it the best and the worst, but the different ways that we are and inevitably will bring with us to this community. There's that self that is honest before God, pure-hearted, that is aware of all we receive, aware there's nothing we have done or can do to deserve it. The self aware we act in ways to dishonour those gifts, and in so doing we end up dishonouring ourselves and the one who we might name God, who gives us these things. And for this we are sorry. We are heartfelt sorry. We know our need for mercy, or we might say the grace of forgiveness. We're made right with God, justified like the tax collector, when we are willing and able to receive forgiveness, to reorient and align with God. Then there's that other self that we may well be quite familiar with, the one where we work really hard and work really well with great ardency to make sure that we live well, that we're right and holy and worthy before God. But if we pay too much attention there, we might find that we decide we know what that is, that we are the arbiter of what is holy and right and worthy. And then we decide to judge and determine the worth of another because we know. But the truth is, we do tend to judge a lot of people in the world, even though we may not say that out loud. We probably don't have to look too far. Think of the people in our work, in our community, or the places we work, or our family, or maybe even in this space. There's some people that just rub you up the wrong way. No matter how hard you pray about it, it just doesn't change. And it happens before we know it. And it's hard to give it up, because in a strange way, it's part of making who we are, not them. And justifying our position over against them locates us. So yes, it is good to have all that passion and energy and want to be sure about our faith. It gets a lot of good stuff done. Because without that kind of passion and zeal, we probably wouldn't still be in a place like this that talks about continuity with tradition and all that sort of thing. We wouldn't be working hard. Not that we should stop. But being religious in continuity with tradition, we might just need to be careful that we are not blinded to what the actual heart of things is, that open-heartedness. When we judge others, you see, we inevitably police and judge ourselves much more, if not more harshly. And if we're not mindful, we can come to think that we do in fact have to earn God's favour, and that we can. We become like those who determine what God's favour is, what God's favour looks like, what the edges of it are, and who is allowed to have it. We come to think our effort will make us holy, will make us right with God, and in a funny, bizarre way, God disappears out of that story. It's a process that diminishes us, it shrinks our world, it makes our lives and our focus incredibly narrow. And if we're not careful, we may find that we have become the purpose for and of God, the point of it all, because that's what mostly fills our world. And we might be okay with that. But if we feel a bit uncomfortable, if we consider that we would prefer to be a conduit rather than a filter of God into the world, today's tax collector might just give us some hope. What is asked is the intention of our heart, to be honest about how we are, to be willing to receive forgiveness, the awareness that we can change, and be open to receive the wholeness that we already are in God. It might be a willingness to act with God rather than as